This program is brought to you by the National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors, promoting political advocacy, education, and the ethical conduct of its members nationwide.
Hello, welcome to the latest edition of NAIFA's Programs in a Box. My name is Tye Elliott. I'm the Vice President of Broker Sales for Aflac, and we're here to talk to you today about the next phase of healthcare and the new role of the broker in the marketplace. Today's shift in healthcare reform and laws creates a huge demand for that trusted advisor, but it is a big change for many of our current health brokers as far as how they approach their clients. From Aflac's most recent Aflac Workforces report, we found that almost 50%, actually 49% of health brokers today are considering actually leaving the profession. This is creating a huge opportunity for those that are going to fill that void, and the new role of the broker that takes on a more advanced role or more wide scope, if you will, into being that employee advisor for the employer creates tremendous opportunity. As we expand beyond just the focus on the healthcare insurance itself, but look at the overall picture of how it affects the financial picture of the employer, what it means to the employees with healthcare reform, and being able to provide education and systems to help them package their benefit program creates a huge demand and a huge opportunity. One of the things that prompted this when healthcare reform was introduced is minimum loss ratios. That affected the revenue streams of many brokers, so they had to shift into other areas of the marketplace. And some found this more difficult than anticipated. Some found it as opportunity to be able to partner with various firms and various ancillary services to really be able to bring their clients a robust package to move forward into this new era, and also take advantage of the new law and say, how can we more efficiently run our businesses for profit, for the benefit of our employees and the well-being of our employees. So let's look at the next phase of healthcare. Consumer-driven healthcare is impacting employees' outlooks on benefits overall. Employers are looking to brokers for guidance on how not only to navigate through the choices of benefit, but also make sure they're in compliance with new tax laws and new laws surrounding healthcare reform. At the same time, employees are demanding education, as the healthcare laws can be very confusing. So their expectation of the employer is to educate them on changes and choices and options that they might have. So this puts a burden back on the employer to be able to provide that education, and they're going to look to the broker or that trusted advisor to help them facilitate that information, but not only to give that to the employer, but able to assist in educating the employees and getting that communication directly to the employees so the employees can make those choices. In a consumer-driven model, the employees are definitely in need of the support. In the Aflac Workforces report, 78% believe that healthcare reform will require them to take greater control of their healthcare, but yet 73% of them say it's too complicated for them to make educated decisions. 68% believe that their employer will provide this education for them, but a much lower percentage of employers are expecting to communicate any differently than they currently are. So that creates a gap that allows the broker to step in, fill that void, and provide a valued service to their clients. Companies are also struggling with healthcare reform. 27% of brokers named client uncertainty about healthcare reform as the top issue for them right now. 79% of brokers at least somewhat agree their clients aren't prepared for healthcare reform. So the fact that 73% aren't falling into the camp that is a top priority are missing the boat. And therefore, I do see that why we have this huge transition. Another activity that's happened frequently in that decision of health brokers to perhaps leave the marketplace is there is a massive consolidation going on in the industry. Large firms are buying smaller firms at an alarming rate, and all you do is follow the money. They wouldn't be investing that big money in this if the future didn't look bright. So to be able to capture that relationship with the employer is critical to future success. So at the same time, the employers are looking to the brokers more than ever. 36% of brokers agree that health care reform legislation represents an opportunity for them in their business. 50% of the brokers feel strongly that they have confidence in their own firm's future in the industry and their ability to go. So again, I point back to that 50%. That means about half our brokers are very confident in what their firm is doing to help their clients towards healthcare reform and see a good opportunity for themselves in the future. And the other half are struggling. They're not sure what direction their firm's going. So again, it creates a huge opportunity to step in and fill that void. So to excel in the new healthcare landscape, the brokers need to act as a marketer, a counselor, and an advocate. So in the case of a marketer, first of all, getting out and promoting the fact that you have a well-rounded knowledge of healthcare reform and how it affects the employer, so you can educate them and bring them up to speed. Secondly, obviously, they're looking for the broker to bring solutions. As I'm making these decisions about healthcare reform, how does that affect the rest of my business? And this is where voluntary benefits are seeing a huge surge, because they're now becoming, instead of an option for the employees, they're becoming an important part of the planning overall piece and how it affects the rest of the business. You know, the voluntary benefit piece can not only affect the decisions that the employees make in electing their new health care as far as taking on a higher deductible or higher out-of-pocket expense, but it also could affect the bottom line of the employer in other areas such as workman's comp, taxes, and other administrative costs. So as the broker comes into the employer, they're looking for solutions that maybe address part of their overall operating expenses that have very little to do with the health insurance. But if filling that void can improve the bottom line on other areas of their business, you have a very open audience with the employer. To effectively communicate benefit options to employers and employees alike, brokers need to change the traditional approach to communicating healthcare benefits. In the past, we've evolved in the healthcare industry as a quote machine, if you will. Each year we come back in the renewal. We do our best to shop the different options for our employees and employers. We compare costs, we spreadsheet the benefits, and we try to choose the best option based on cost benefit for the client. Many times we're fulfilling the desires or the requests of the client as the client has come up with a strategy, and they're giving us their strategy, and now we're trying to fulfill it with product. Today, the employers will have much less of a strategy, especially smaller employers where they may not have a full human resources department. They may have people that wear multiple hats within the company or the organization. The time that they need to spend to formulate a plan, they're going to rely more on their broker to help them formulate that plan and integrate the different products and services that can make that most efficient. The area that we're seeing the biggest vacuum, if you will, is the 50 and under market. Now, over 90% of the companies in the United States have 50 employees or less. That is the area of the law that is dramatically different than employers over 50. So you're going to have more options by small employers, more research to do, and less resources that the employer actually has for somebody to do those resources. So they are relying on a broker more than they have in the past. Over 60% of small businesses 25 and under before healthcare reform didn't offer health insurance. And they just ignored it and they said, we don't have to deal with it, but now it's the law. So now they have to deal with it in one form or another, whether that's letting their people go to the exchange, putting in a sponsored plan, but it's going to require the advice of their broker to be able to guide them through it. So again, they're in compliance with the law, but secondly, that they're getting the best bang for their buck and they're making wise decisions on how they're going to facilitate a benefit program for their employees. We're going so much to a contribution model. Just like retirement plans in the late 80s and early 90s, we saw a large shift from defined benefit retirement plans to defined contribution. That is going to be the biggest trend we see in the marketplace with health insurance. We're going to see a bigger shift from defined benefit, that this is your health plan, this is how much it costs, here's your options A, B, and C, pick one, to here's a X amount of dollars per month that you have to spend on benefits. We're going to offer you a menu of benefits to choose from so that you can build your own health care plan, and you can build a plan that addresses maybe other issues, anything from wellness to how we're going to address out-of-pocket expenses from an accident or illness that have nothing to do with the medical, which is where voluntary benefits have really entered the fray. So it gives greater freedom and flexibility to the employee, but it also puts a great deal of responsibility on them. Now, as we mentioned earlier, most employees feel that they're not educated enough or not capable of making a good decision when it comes to the benefits, especially in this changing environment. In fact, 59% of employees in the Aflac Workforce Report say that they are not comfortable making a good decision, or they think they will make the wrong one if left on their own. And that is where that education piece in presenting, it's more than spreadsheeting benefits. It's how do we execute and implement that communication once the employer makes a decision. How's that communicated to the employees? And that's where the broker or trusted advisor steps in and creates that communication plan that is critical to success. For the long term of your business, it's also critical to success. That is how loyalty is built. So if the employees look at the trusted advisor as their main point of contact, and the person that they can pick up the phone or reach to help me understand what I'm getting into, at time of claim, which is the whole reason for our being and our broker in our industry, we make a promise to the people to help them when they need us. At the time of claim, if they have that resource to go to and can execute and help them through that process, that's where you build the loyalty. And if it's executed effectively, you will be long looked at as the trusted advisor. If it's not handled effectively, they'll be looking for somebody else. So let's talk about the 4 P's of product placement: product, price, place, and promotion. Helping your clients choose the right products is going to be vital as we move forward. And again, many health brokers used to shop the health insurance, choose deductibles, co-payments, different benefit options in the scope of what does the health insurance mean. More importantly, the focus was always on how do we make sure that the money gets into the hands of the providers to offset the bills. So the health insurance would cover the doctor bills, the emergency room visits, the surgeries, everything that the hospital charged for. And typically there was a large void in other expenses that were created by a medical issue. Now, in the past, a lot of voluntary benefit choices stemmed around dental, life, and perhaps short-term disability, which are all important products, but sometimes miss the need of the largest expense that the consumer would face when going through a serious accident or illness. And I've stated many times that if you looked 5 years ago at any employee benefit selling magazine, you would be hard-pressed to find an article about cancer insurance, critical illness, or accident, and if you did, it would be about this big on the back page. Today, it's the front cover and half the magazine. Why is that? In my opinion, it's not based on the need of the consumer, because anybody that's gone through a serious illness or accident realizes that the out-of-pocket expenses go far beyond the medical bills. The number one cause of bankruptcy today in America is due to medical bills and bills created by a medical situation, which just doesn't mean only the hospital and doctor bills. But culturally, that realization has crept in because of health care reform. With people realizing that out-of-pocket is a real issue, with it being on the news every night that Americans are going to face a higher burden on what they're responsible for if they're going through a medical issue, they realize that it goes beyond that scope. So where we traditionally looked at voluntary products like dental, life insurance, short-term disability, full disclosure, we are a large provider of dental insurance, and I think is an important product. However, I've never met anybody that lost their house or went through bankruptcy because they had to have a tooth pulled. Where there's other products that face critical illness, cancer, for instance, 1 in 2 men will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime, 1 in 3 women will be diagnosed with cancer, and when somebody is, it creates an enormous amount of expense that go above and beyond the medical. Missed time of work, travel in many cases to go to a St. Jude or an MD Anderson or a Johns Hopkins, the extra burden that it puts on the family. We even talked to a family from New York that the expense created by an illness or accident was just the cab rides back and forth to the hospital or doctor because the person was unable to drive. So there's a number of expenses that come up. So when you're looking at the entire benefit package, we have to realize that that is a critical part of the package. Another statistic from the Aflac Workforce Report says that 46% of Americans cannot come up with $1,000 in an emergency. And yet our survey showed that employees realize this, but they do not feel that they have the discipline or the ability to save any more money than that. So where do they turn when they have a serious accident or illness, and just the health bills themselves are going to be out of pocket $10,000 to $12,000, let alone the other expense? But most employees surveyed said they do have the discipline, if a product was provided, to be able to put a specific dollar amount aside every week, they would do it. So therefore, we've seen a huge increase in demand for the voluntary insurance. Secondly, the revenue model that I talked about earlier, because of minimum loss ratios and the change in the revenue model for health insurance, in order for a broker to function effectively as a business owner, they have to change their revenue model, and the voluntary benefit piece is a great solution for the employer, as well as another avenue of revenue for the broker, which keeps you in business and keeps you moving forward. So realizing that the entire scope of the healthcare dilemma and the reality of the employees in the marketplace leads us to understand that that trusted advisor needs to branch out beyond just the health insurance into some of these other areas. We want to know how it affects the overall well-being of the ultimate user, which is that employee. We need to understand how it affects productivity from the employer's standpoint. And productivity includes how the benefits interact and how the benefit communications work. And I think this is a critical point. Number one, healthy employees, we know, are much more productive. If we have somebody that's battling illness or battling injury or is not healthy, the likelihood that they're going to miss time off of work increases. But it's not just the missed time, it's the distraction. If I have someone who's sick at home, I'm healthy as an employee, but my spouse is going through an illness, my mind's not on my work, my mind's at home. And the stress amount raises dramatically when that stress creates financial pressure. Again, with half the workforce in the United States not able to come up with $1,000, we need to find ways to alleviate that pressure and give more productive workers. When you look at accident policies, we found in many industries that we see work comp claims go down when we offer an accident plan for the employees. The incentives in the accident plan, there's no incentive for people to miss work. They actually have a financial incentive if they do have an accident and it's off the job to collect the money from the provider, whether it's Aflac or another carrier, and then return to work so they can earn their money. So they actually are financially incentivized to return to work, get back from that injury, and be productive. So many employers use this as a tool not only to provide that extra level of coverage for the employee and that financial protection for the employee, but also hedge against Monday morning claims, which is the exact issue that the accident plan can address. From a financial standpoint, many financial services reps look at the 401k as probably the primary savings vehicle for the employee. And in years past, voluntary benefits were almost looked at as a competing element against a 401k. And some employers would make the decision, we don't want to offer a voluntary product because that might take some of the dollars that we know they need for retirement. And they're getting a matching in some cases, so they're better off putting their dollars here. Well, in fact, what we found is when we offered a voluntary product, it enhanced the participation in 401ks for the very reason that the 401k is typically the primary vehicle of savings for the average American consumer. And if a serious accident or illness comes up, the first place they have to go to get that money is the 401k, which destroys the purpose of the 401k. They're taking that money out. Now they have nothing for retirement, and they're out of pocket, and the money's gone. So more and more we're seeing the financial services rep come into the picture and looking at critical illness policies or accident plans or cancer plans as a hedge against anything that can tear down the whole purpose behind the retirement plan. Given the savings rate in America, you can see why that's an important strategy when you're looking at product. And we're also looking at the success of the employees. The Aflac Workforce Report has a number of statistics surrounding the best employers in the United States. What are viewed as the best employers from the employee's perspective. Typically, they're not always the highest paid employees. In fact, more Americans than not say they would change jobs for a perceived better benefit program and be willing to accept less pay if that was available. And I say perceived because many times people leave a good benefit plan to go to another company that they perceive as a better benefit plan only because the other company communicates what those benefits are and how they affect them directly. Okay, let's talk about price. To combat tightening budgets with benefit solutions, we know that controlling healthcare costs is on the top of mind in 49% of employers. So how do we choose the right benefits to lower the costs? Again, we have to go beyond the scope of healthcare insurance. So if we could say, if we look at the metal plans, you got your bronze, silver, gold, and platinum plans. Obviously, there's a price benefit. But we need to go beyond the price and look to, okay, what is going to be the burden on the employee once the plan is implemented? A few years ago, we saw this in the car insurance business, and we still see the ads for, the companies save $15 on your car insurance. I won't get into their tagline, but the ads are how you save money on car insurance. Well, when we really hit that mode where people were more comfortable shopping for their car insurance online or making a phone call, we saw them opting for higher and higher deductibles due to price. What happened over a few years, though, at the time of claim, when they realized how much out of pocket they were, we see those same clients shifting back to a lower deductible to make it affordable. So if they weren't fully educated on their choice, they often chose a lower cost benefit in the beginning, only to pay a big price at time of claim. So helping educate the consumer up front when we're talking about price, we have to address the bigger issue. Again, integrating the voluntary benefits along with the health strategy is important. We're also talking about controlling costs. There is the price of the product, and then there is the cost of doing business. And it's more important than ever to advise the employer on what the overall cost of doing business. Sometimes a benefit package can address other issues. Sometimes it can even fund other initiatives. One of the ways that voluntary benefits currently used in the marketplace is as a funding mechanism. Voluntary benefit providers will often provide value-added services, including benefit administration, benefit platforms, which takes an administrative cost away from the employer and shifts it onto the voluntary provider. So there is a inherent savings. So it may be a bit higher cost benefit package that you've put together, but if it includes value-added services, you're really impacting the bottom line of that company. Controlling costs, as we talk about the defined contribution, it's not about just the cost today, but it's the cost of the future. So as employers are shifting to a defined contribution, they can say, okay, I plan on spending X amount of dollars per employee per month. We're going to give them an allowance, and now we want to pick a menu of benefits to offer those employees. Now I know next year I either plan on keeping that benefit the same, or maybe I'll increase it 5% or 6% or whatever percent that employer is comfortable with, and they're going to look at that broker for advice in making that decision. But now they know what their costs are going to be related to health insurance 2 years, 3 years, 5 years out, and it's a very controlled environment. Where today, they don't know what their cost was going to be from 1 year to the next. In fact, over the last 10 years, we've seen an escalating cost of health insurance that's out of control and out of the scope of the budget of the employer, especially small employers. So when you're looking at price, let's look at not just price of the product, but let's look at the overall cost of implementation from the employer, and obviously the impact it has on the budget of the employee. Let's go to the third P, which is place. What is the best place for engagement? Now again, our ultimate goal is to get to the end consumer, which is the employee. Once a strategy is chosen between the broker and the employer, that's where the work begins. How are we going to communicate benefits to the employees? Now, many large employers have gone with technology and benefit platforms, online portals to educate their employees, and that's become more effective than it was in years past, only because of the advance of technology. The way we can communicate benefits through avatars and different forms of media communication, even text. Now we can take advantage of a full range of technology But as technology advances, we're also seeing a surge in the demand for face-to-face meetings from counselors. Because of the tax law being new and complicated, employees still feel much better that they can talk to a live human being and walk through the various processes. So where in the past the face-to-face enrollment sometimes was looked at as a cost item because you're taking time away from the business to educate the employees, it is now perceived much higher as a true value because you're taking the burden off of the employer to be able to have to do that same education. So there's really been a shift. When we see participation levels in voluntary benefits in particular, with health benefits, there's going to be more flexibility in participation. In the past, the employer chose the health insurance. Here's what we're doing. If you want health insurance or not, here's, check the box here, and here's option A, B, or C. Now, when there's other choices or various options from the, going out to a public exchange, maybe a private exchange, and various menu options, it's easier to put them on a technology platform and say, here's your menu. But it's much harder for the consumer to consume all that information and make a wise decision. So the demand for execution or placement is shifting towards the face-to-face education and then the constant follow-through. And we've seen really a blending when we look at large enrollment firms that have been very successful in the past on group platforms through the use of technology platforms and call centers. We see them much more often using face-to-face enrollers than they did in the past. And in organizations that focus solely on face-to-face communication, we are seeing them implement call center and technology platforms as an integrated approach to constant communication with the employees. So there's a blend taking place, and it really works to the advantage of the broker if you have knowledge of all these tools and all the resources that are available to you. And again, that placement drives participation. Participation drives revenue, and it also drives the results that the employer is looking for. If we implement a great benefit strategy and nobody participates, we receive no financial benefit. If the strategy is sound and can save the employer or help the bottom line in many areas, then the better educated the employees are, and the more they participate, the more that's going to drive that value up, which again drives the value of you, the broker, as you're being the trusted advisor to your client. Okay, the last of the 4 P's is promotion. Promote benefits like a marketing professional. Many times, and again, I believe this leads to some of the exodus we're seeing in the business, many brokers have fallen down the path of being the technical expert. I'm going to figure out the cost, benefit. I'm going to advise you on the technical side of our benefits and help you make the right technical decision. But that marketing of the benefits is critical, especially as we now have different options and the burden is shifted to the consumer. They're going to have more of an array of choice. Again, they need to understand the promotion. Repetition. We can tell somebody something once and they get it, and then 5 minutes later after we've walked away, they forget about it. A week later, they forget more about it. So that constant promotion in the workplace. One of the things that has helped Aflac be a highly successful company is the nature of our product. The products naturally in an accident plan and critical illness plan, when you're looking at a group of people, whether it be a group of 10 employees or a group of 50,000, naturally claims are going to take place. The claim itself sometimes becomes a promotion. Even with HIPAA laws and privacy laws, employees share information with each other, positive or negative. How many times have you walked into an employer and one of the employees is going through a tough time and you see the candy jar on the desk with their person's picture on it, and we're looking to help them financially get through this. Or you see a fundraiser, the employees rally around a family who's gone through a tough time, and they get together at the local bar or something and they have a fundraiser and everybody contributes or wears a t-shirt or does something to help that family through it. So you have that community inside the employee group that does really look out for each other. And when somebody's going through a tough time, a lot of people know about it. At the same time, when somebody has a serious accident or illness, goes through a hospital stay, the feedback that comes back to most of the employees is usually negative about the health insurance. A person could have a $10,000 hospital bill, and if the health insurance pays $9,000 of it, that's just what it's supposed to do, but the person's still at a hardship because they're out that $1,000. So if it's not promoted how well that's, how important that health insurance is constantly through the marketplace after the sale, then you lose the impact of it really being a good benefit. On the voluntary side, people typically collect a large check. So they get cash payment at within a week of having an accident or illness, which allows them to not have to do the fundraiser and all these things, allows them to take care of the financial burden, and they feel good about it, and they tell people about it. Hey, look at that check I got from my voluntary benefit piece that's helped my family get through this, and it spreads like wildfire. So you see the loyalty level among voluntary benefit policyholders at time of claim spike, and again, which entrenches you as the trust advisor that brought that benefit to the table. I can't tell you how many times in my career I've received testimonial letters from a client that went through a cancer or a heart attack or a serious accident, and how that voluntary check made a difference in them keeping their home or carrying on. Very rarely do you see that on the health insurance, even though the health insurance might pay a $300,000 bill. In the end, the consumer is still out of pocket, or they're still burdened with other financial expenses. So promotion of what you're doing, not only up front to say, look, we have a great benefit package coming. A lot of people are afraid of what's happening with healthcare reform, but we're going to bring some good solutions, and if we do this right, you're going to be in a better financial position moving forward than you ever were before healthcare reform. And we're going to help educate you along the way on controlling those costs for the long term. If that is the message up front, now the follow-through is critical. Once that product placement has happened, now that follow-through, making sure the claims are paid, making sure you're working with the carriers, making sure billing works properly. The carrier, the broker, and the client have to work in tandem to make sure that communication happens and it's a positive experience for the client. Because in the end, if they're not happy with it, you're not going to be their broker anymore. The carrier's going to be out. So, understanding the execution piece of both the communication to the employees and the carrier partners you're working with or the vendor partners you're working with is critical to the experience, and promoting that constantly after the fact is a critical part of the sale. So we talk about being the trusted advisor, and it's also being the trusted counselor. That could include you as the individual, or that could include your team if you have a team of people or partners that are helping educate those employees. When employees are not educated about benefits, the costly cycle is ignited. So ignorance of options, number one, will cause low participation. With low participation, again, you fail to take advantage of the impact to the bottom line of the employer. Now, if the employees don't make good decisions or they're not educated about the decisions they make, you get situations like, hey, I opted for the lowest cost health plan possible because that's what I could afford, and then as soon as they have their first claim, they're wiped out. I opted not to take certain types of voluntary benefits or other options that are being provided to me because I didn't understand them and it looked like a cost item to me, but when I understood that I could shift dollars from one pocket to the others and have a more effective coverage for what I personally see as hurdles in my future, then I can make a more educated decision, and I'm healthier financially, and I have less stress at work. When we go back to types of stress at work, sometimes they can be created in the workplace, a bad boss or bad working conditions. But so much stress in the American workforce is financially related. When they're worried about the bills that have to be paid and the stress they're under, and they're looking at their paycheck and there's not enough there to get there, that's where the stress is created. So that is why that statistic about more employees will leave an employer to get what's perceived as a better benefit package exists, because they just want to be more educated in what their choices are. It's going to be critical on education now, as we started earlier, because the choice is shifted to the employee. It's been fascinating to watch some of the technology advances in enrollment platforms. There are some out there that walk the person through the decision process and in my opinion, kind of lead them to a decision. 59% of people choosing their benefits will take a recommendation, and that's their first option. So if you're educating them in the overall package and then you make a recommendation, 59% of the people are probably going to go with that recommendation. Now, with great opportunity comes great responsibility. That responsibility becomes huge on the broker to help make sure they're making good decisions. and we're educated on the information that we're giving them so they make the right ones, because they're really going to go off the advice of the counselor. If left on their own, they're afraid, they're not sure they will make the right decisions, and again, they're looking back to the employer for the answers. So it can have a negative impact, again, at the time of claim. Nelson Griswold is a very well-known speaker that I've seen in many publications, and one of the things in his book about the new era of brokers is that you can't spreadsheet voluntary benefits. And I found that as a fascinating piece, because it talks about when you compare cost-benefit of voluntary benefits, it's not always apples and oranges. And if you don't have a good understanding of it, you don't see the impact until the time of claim. So choosing the right carrier to deal with, choosing the right implementation, choosing the right vendor partners is a more important item than the actual cost of that dollar benefit. So in my opinion, the days of the spreadsheeters are dwindling. And that's why you see a big exodus out of the health insurance broker space right now, and that's why you see a lot of other financial services experts getting into the industry. In my opinion, the barrier to entry into the healthcare market for a property and casualty broker or a financial services advisor is lower than it's ever been, because healthcare reform has leveled the playing field, where everybody needs to get education and experience on how health insurance works and how this is going to be given to the consumer. So it allows sometimes that financial advisor of the business owner or that property and casualty agent that's had a relationship over years, sometimes that allows them to step in and take the primary role in the relationship, and the health insurance may become secondary. So something to think about as a health broker when you're approaching your clients is, if you don't bring the value, somebody else may step in and fill that void. And this is where education makes the big difference. Whoever gives the best education to the client and the employee is going to win in the long term. In this new era for the broker, it is critical that the broker becomes an advocate for the employees to take control. What the employer is really searching for is, as they shift the burden of cost to the employee in a reasonable way, they also want to shift that control. You see many options that are growing in the market, even as far as payroll billing. There's different options that takes the billing method out of the hands of the employer. The payroll responsibility, administrative responsibility. So as all these options are available, the employers are seeing an opportunity to shift not only cost, but decision burden onto the employees. So it is important that in supporting the employer, you become an advocate to the employees, that this is really a good thing for you if you take control and if you learn about what your choices are. If you're a passive broker and say, well, I'm just going to deal with the employer, and then when they shift the decision to the employees, you say, surprise, it's really not that effective. But if you're promoting to the employees that, I'm here to serve your company and I'm here to serve you, and we're going to help you make good decisions and allow you to take control of this whole healthcare reform thing, and really talk about risk mitigation as opposed to health insurance, then I can give you an overall sense of security and financial well-being that maybe you didn't have before, or give you that freedom to make your own choices and have flexibility in your career down the road. So becoming an advocate for the employees really strengthens your position as the trusted advisor in that account, because you build loyalty through that education and through that process. And now the employer is less likely to go to another advisor, because why would I get rid of this person when my employees are really sold on the broker I have? When you have to make tough decisions with employers, maybe a plan goes the wrong way. Maybe the carrier that you chose has a change in ways they're implemented. Maybe there's a change in price. There's a change in cost, and we're going to see a lot of that in the upcoming years as we really start to understand what these laws mean and what the impact are. If you've built that loyalty with the employees, then the employer is more apt to work through those challenges with you, and those challenges will happen, than if you're just their advisor and they say, look, I got frustrated, I look bad to my employees, they don't even know my broker, I'm going to get another one. That's how I will save face with my own employees, because we're going to show we're going to make a change here. When I try to move that advisor out that the employees trust and count on, it's going to be much tougher to move you out. So for long-term security of your relationships in your business, it is critical that you become the advocate for the employees, and that's how they view you. One important statistic to realize that we got out of the Aflac Workforces Report was 51% of workers say they don't prefer to be in more control of their health insurance, okay, which is obviously generated by fear. As we said earlier, you need to become the advocate. So promoting that choice is good, is important, and as long as people understand that I'm going to have choices and somebody's going to help me understand what those choices mean, then freedom of choice is a great thing. Freedom of choice to half of Americans right now means my employer is going to hand me a packet or send me something online, and I'm going to have to figure out what to do. That is where the fear lies. So again, going back to being the advocate among the employees and promoting, not only verbally but through media, through communication, that this is a good thing coming. To give you an example of a very successful voluntary benefits case and talking about communicating to employees and advocating, we dealt with a large national retailer that focuses on young people a few years ago. And this was a retailer that typically had 3 or 4 employees in each store across the country with hundreds of stores. And the average employee was a 23 to 24-year-old male. So we had to come up with ways to, how would we educate that population and advocate for choice in ways other than traditional, where we sent something out via email or we did calls or face-to-face. So we came up with a text/cartoon program. This was a gaming industry or video game industry. So by coming up with a comic, and this was one of the national enrollment firms initiative, they came up with superheroes for each benefit. So as the education went out, it was almost like each employee received a comic book/video game character, and the theme was around this character, and that's how they helped educate them understood. So there was high engagement from the employees. Say, look, I want to learn more about this superhero that helps me if I'm going through a heart attack or cancer situation. This is a superhero that helps me through an accident, and this is what it means to me financially. So it was educated in a way that caught the marketing piece, that caught the consumer's eye and forced them or caused them to want to learn more, and also gave them a comfort level with what they were doing. So this isn't just this technical jargon that my dad used to talk about. This is real life stuff, and it's kind of interesting. And then the communication that happened after the fact was largely through text. We're going to have a counselor come into your store on this date and this time. Are you going to be there? If we called these people, they would have never answered. If we emailed them, they probably would have never read it. But when we text them, we'd get a response right back and say, yes, I will be there to meet with this counselor, and they can kind of walk me through this. So as you become the advocate for the employees, think about how they're going to consume the information. There's enormous amount of information on there about communicating with millennials, communicating with baby boomers, and we do it in different ways. So really looking at the client base, how the company's structured. Is it 1,000 people working in one plant, or is it 500 people working in various offices across the country? There are different strategies that take place on that education and communication piece. So mastering the marketing side of that is critical. When you're looking at vendor partners, look at companies like Aflac that are very strong in marketing. We have the duck, and it's very well known and recognized, so that helps us break down that door in communication. It becomes a very effective way to reach that consumer, along with give them confidence. I know the brand, I know the duck, good reputation. In the Aflac Workforce Report, it talks about brand. When you're putting an item, people will shop brand more than price, especially nowadays. If you recommend a TV set, a consumer is much more likely to buy a brand they trust for a higher price than get a discount TV. Automobiles, if we weren't concerned as a society with brand, then there'd only be one type of high mileage car out there that got us around. And if you look around, there's some pretty expensive cars on the road. So brand is important when it comes to trust and people choosing a financial service. That brand has to be a trusted brand. So as you're looking at the overall approach, when you're providing health insurance, the brand of the carrier. When you're providing voluntary, the brand of the carrier is critical to get that confidence level enough to bring them to the table and open up and discuss and create more confidence. That changes the statistic of 51% of workers being reluctant to take control. If they feel they are in control, but they have a trusted brand or trusted partner to help them guide it, then they're much more apt to be excited about it, and they're much more apt to feel that their benefit package in their workplace is pretty strong. If it feels like a burden, then all of a sudden they're going to say, well, our benefits aren't very good because I don't even understand them. I'm going to opt out of them, and again, the cycle begins. You have opt-out, you have low participation, you have frustration, and then as most brokers know, there's always going to be some kind of issue on the back end. When you have people involved, there's issues. So whether it's a billing issue or an invoicing issue, if you have low value, every problem becomes bigger. If we have a company of 500 people, we have 400 people participate, and we have 5 problems, generally, the company's not always happy about it, but they'll live with it because they're getting huge value. If we have 500 people and we have 50 participants and we have 5 problems, that feels like 10% of the people have a problem. That means everybody has a problem. So after the fact, putting that right brand, that right carrier, that right vendor partner in as part of the strategy, and then educating the employees where they have confidence in what they're getting is critical to the success of the program. And you will see, you will be able to move that number of 51% of the people not wanting to take control. Because there's no question with defined benefit going to defined contribution, the employers want the employees to take control. So in conclusion, this is probably the most exciting time in the history of our industry to be involved as a broker in our business. It requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of education. But again, ultimately, it's about communication and relationships. I've always said the insurance business is and always will be primarily a relationship business. As a carrier, we make a promise to our employees and our policyholders that when you need us, we're going to be there and we're going to deliver the cash. As a broker, you have a relationship with both the employer and the employees, and they say when you need our advice and when you need our expertise, we're going to be there to help you through it. And ultimately, that's what our promises rest on. They're handshake promises, and we have to deliver. It becomes the greatest opportunity that I've seen in my career because of the people that have chosen to opt out of the business, because of the space that's been created with that big differentiator between 50 employees and under that is really now playing by a different set of rules than the companies with 50 and over. And that 50 and under represents such a huge percentage of the overall businesses, and yet large employers employ half the people. So it really segments the market into different opportunities. I think the opportunity in the small employer market has never been greater because now they do have to make decisions. Because it's the law that they have to have some options, they're either going to jump on board and provide health insurance where they didn't used to, or they're going to push people out to the exchange, which creates a huge need for other types of benefits. In large employers, there's a big shift. Some of the largest employers have been planning for this for years, but with all of the changes and the interpretation of 70,000 plus pages of a healthcare legislation, those plans have to be altered. So they're looking more and more to those trusted advisors. But the real opportunity is to get to that everyday employee that's just looking for a way through this difficult decision, but coming out at the other end showing that you brought value and help bring that to them. From a revenue standpoint, obviously, that's how our business is built. How do we monetize the service to people? I've told people for many years, if you look for a way that you can bring value to the consumer, the money will find you. So there are products and services out there that give the broker the ability to monetize and generate revenue, which everybody in business is interested in. But if it becomes our mission to build relationships and bring value to our consumers, those products will naturally fall into place, and the revenue, you'll be more successful than you've ever been. I talked to many leaders in the industry, probably 18 to 24 months ago, some of the most successful people in the country, and I heard a similar message across the board. And this was, again, close to 2 years ago. Those that understand the new landscape and survive through the change and adapt will prosper for the next 10 years. I don't know when it will end, but we have a unique window of time to really capitalize on this shift in our culture and in our country. Those that recognize and that seize that opportunity are going to prosper for the next 10 years and beyond. But those that don't position themselves in time will probably go by the wayside. And again, as you see the massive consolidation going on, the weaker players in the field are those that choose to only have their scope on one facet of the business are really struggling to be able to monetize and generate that revenue to stay in the business. Those that expand their scope, whether they do it individually or personally or within their agency, or they partner with other firms, are finding great success in partnering and great value in doing that. I've been amazed at working with some of the largest insurance agencies in the country, where the voids are, where they're looking for help, with us being in the industry, in the voluntary industry, for example. Our Wingman program is exploding, where we're taking voluntary experts and partnering them with agencies so they have an immediate go-to person that has expertise in not only the voluntary products, but the implementation, which is the key. When they have that, when they can go out and acquire from that voluntary industry that part of their firm and expand their expertise internally, now they're capitalizing on the overall opportunity in the market. They're also understanding how to bridge that between their property and casualty producers and their health producers. Obviously, cross-selling is a big part of your strategy. A lot of times that voluntary piece is the one that can bridge both sides of that strategy and then give you full access to that account. Sometimes they're going to keep those separate. They may go with one health broker and they may go with another agency to be their P&C broker. It can often be that voluntary benefit that's the pivotal piece that for the long term entrenches the trusted advisor as the primary broker for that company. So by integrating this, recognizing the tremendous opportunity we have forward, I hope you can take some of this information and apply it to your own personal career or your agency's career. We obviously would love to be a resource for you. So thank you for taking the time with us today, and good luck in your future.
Thank you for participating in this program. For more information regarding products, programs, services, and other NAIFA member benefits, visit www.naifa.org.